And if you're reporting to a shelter, you need to check beforehand if that shelter is actually still functioning. What has exacerbated the problem is that there is now a question of which areas being reported are actually shelters. People are being sent by some news organizations to places that, although they use the word shelter, are not actually shelters. Some hospitals are still reporting that they are receiving people who are seeking shelter as well, and police and fire, same problem, which they were never listed as shelters. So it's important to understand what is a shelter in your area and what isn't. And what concerns me is if a hospital or a police station, fire station, etc. is no longer in operation, there's a possibility that people with nowhere to go, or people who are staging in these areas, it could still be there awaiting help. And civil defense has said they've been trying to clarify this information, but it seems that it's becoming even more convoluted because the shelters that fail are still being listed and reported as viable shelters. So now we'd love to continue to report on shelters, but many news agencies, ours included, are now refusing to post shelter stations to the public. So we're just going to follow suit with that and leave those shelters off the list, at least until we have the ability to confirm them. So, excuse me. So yeah, the food and other situations here have been becoming more of a rationing thing here, and a couple of us have, I'm going to say we're in need of some short-term medication for some of the sicknesses that have been going around. But unfortunately, I'm under the impression that we will not be seeing any of that other than some of the smaller stuff. And a doctor's visit, I'm going to say, is out of the question. So, I'm just going to continue with the information we have and just go from there. So I know we've been inundated with a great deal of negative information, and I want to try to give some positive to this. We've seen so much mixed between what to do and what not to do. I think a lot of things have been kind of thrown together. So it's on one side we're being told that everything was under control, and suddenly things got a lot worse. And a lot of people right now feel they're in the a lot worse area. So what has now become an almost national quarantine, I want to discuss that, the good news stuff, which you may be shocked to know that there is still exactly that. There's good news out there. I said before that not all of the U.S. is in a quarantine state. There are still parts of Florida, and much of Middle America is still continuing life as normal. There are places that are doing their best to function in this. In some areas that really have not seen anything at all. So there is a flow of what we could best call refugees that are moving into these areas. I originally didn't agree with that word, since that usually denotes like a country, but I was assured by the producer that using the word refugee is correct. So, excuse me. Many people in the east, or the worst affected areas, have begun to move around, and although they did go north and south, so it was almost like a switching of the guard, there is still a great deal that have sought shelter towards the center of the U.S. So this has, you've seen a growing support for movements in this area, and I was told not to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. What was initially independent militias began to organize and mobilize in these areas, and has seen a great deal of success. What is now being called a group or an organization, I don't know how to word it, is best for them to best represent them, but the organization was called Cerberus, and I'm guessing due to its multi-headed snake concept and the idea that they are guarding doorways, it's no longer simply a militia, but is becoming more and more of a joint effort. So the emergency radio groups became kind of the glue that held these groups together, and they're beginning to help them mobilize or put themselves in areas where they can continue to respond to problems, almost similar to a police force. And what became pockets now became more of a group effort. So they're now being called a protective group that goes wherever they are needed. And it's a support structure. So between each different area, they work together as more like a hydra, I guess would be the word for it. But the idea they have a connective tissue around this amateur radio presence that is allowing these similar groups, most of them again were militias, but I don't want to say militias now because there's a lot more people involved, that are going to areas and helping people and becoming somewhat of a defensive force. And so I'm being told that they don't just hunt infected. They do hunt infected, but they're also against the, for the chagrin of many politicians, also upholding the law in cases where things like theft, as one person put it, raiders that may decide to encroach on farms. Thankfully that at this time is not a great deal. There's not a whole group of marauders that are going from place to place at this time, of course, but setting up a structure to protect if that were to become a situation in the future. And it is a possibility of being something in the future. In cities such as shelters that fail, these shelters can fail and become small communities of their own, and the only way for them to truly rely immensely on food and resources is to scout and what are many calling theft of resources. Let's be honest, if you are staying on, say, a football field or in a high school gymnasium, there's not a lot of areas where you can plant or grow food, so the only way to get resources is to go into whatever city or area you have and capture it. So, and I want to say this in some defense, these are areas where much of the population either has moved or simply left everything behind or are seeking shelter. They are not really taking up areas like grocery stores and drug stores, and obviously the local music store does not care if somebody goes in and does something. There's not really much resources there. So it's possible it could also be considered abandoned and basically open season. I don't know if anybody would be against somebody going into a shop that literally does not function anymore and nobody's collecting any bills, that somebody went in and said, I'm taking certain things. And obviously some of these areas do have still a lot of electricity flowing at this time, so refrigerators and things of that nature could be functional. But the fear is that this could turn from something of saying grocery stores and other areas into more of a residential thing where people who are survivors could be victimized by people who are also trying to survive. And that is a real fear. So these groups are getting together and joining in a way to continue to provide protection for people in these areas. And again, this is mostly middle America. You will not see this on the coast. Most of the coastal stuff it's just been disallowed, or there's not any place to really support it. But you're going to see these areas trying to protect those people from taking action. And we're going to see how this growing economic or environmental situation is going to continue to evolve over time, and what role our government is going to play in their existence. And so none of this should be a shock. Resources are indeed drying up, but they do still remain. And that's really the point here, is people don't realize until we get to this point that the goal of everything you do is resource management and how you deal with those resources. For someone who's built a bunker or built something that is sustainable, there's going to be a resource provided to them based on how they have their situation set up. So you're going to want to go to somebody who has a better system of resource management than, say, someone who doesn't. So that's where we're going with that, and how that forms and what's going to come of that in the coming days, months, even years, if we go to that. And yeah, that's something that right now is actually a concern. I think I want to talk about this in a second too. Someone asked if there's still functional hospitals, and the word is absolutely. In fact, there are areas where shelters are exceptionally well maintained. We were just discussing one in Boston, Massachusetts, that has done an exceptional job of maintaining a shelter system. It was also a shelter system that was civilly run prior to any of this stuff happening, so they had shelter systems that were built for the homeless and had been in place for some time. They are near major waterways as well, so they're kind of against the wall when it comes to how they're kind of forming their protection net. And much of the stuff that they're saying is they're storing it on, from, for instance, a major waterway. So you have this mobile storage system, such as a barge, that are being used to store food, and they are fuel-based, so you don't have to worry about a grid support system. So if something goes down, the food is still frozen, still is maintained, and there's ways of getting this stuff out to people within the area. So they also began to shuffle around stuff like hospitals and college infrastructure as well, and using sort of a semblance of treatment options. So there are certain colleges that you can go to, and they will provide treatment centers. I'm under the impression that I think Boston Hospital did shut down, but that there is a leg of it that is being kept running to treat people and help people out. Now, how that system is going, we don't know the full details of it, but to say that something like a Harvard would be setting up its own sort of community is a very real thing, I would say as well. So that's something we want to keep an eye on, and we want to get a little bit more information on. A lot of this we've gotten through third-party sources that have been in the areas and discussing this. So it's great news. So, but we're gonna get a lot of stuff to get to when it comes to this. So I do have to add that this area it's still not in a good way though. So I'm going to ask people not to go cruising up to Boston thinking there's this bastion of hope, and there's, that somebody put out some transmission that said, go here if you want to survive. That's not the case. It is still a city. It is a crowded area. It has a great deal of homelessness, and that has turned many areas in the city into unlivable areas. So much of the western part of the state too, we were straight told that it was abandoned and left to its own devices, at least on a state level. So National Guard used their ability to solely station inside the city and used a consolidation of effort, which would naturally allow for better protection. Like areas like Pennsylvania and New York, they didn't have those options. So New York has become what's being called a battleground city. And it's more of a battleground than it is a city at this point. So, and that being said, maybe that's a good example of what should be done elsewhere, that there is the idea of stationing and mobilizing, and a lot of leadership could go into that structure and making it work. But how they're doing it and what's being done is a totally different concept. So we're going to continue to touch base with that and get information to find out what it is. But a lot of the AP stuff, or any of the Associated Press, or any of the long-form stuff, we don't have access to that. So I would just say, you know what, there's ways of getting in touch with people, and like I said, I'll bring that up. But it couldn't hurt to call in the Army, Navy, Marines either. So yes, there are independent shelters that are doing a great job, and if you have an amateur radio license, you may be better equipped to find them as well. And that's really what I wanted to talk about. I brought it up a couple of seconds here on some of the other situations, and that's where I want to come back to it. This is a big thing. So if you don't have some sort of walkie-talkie, radio setup, whatever, you do not realize what you're missing out on. If you have a way to get one, I would recommend doing it. I just picked one up under advisement, and what used to be a news cycle is a chain of probably millions of people at this point that are pulling information together on these amateur radio networks. And I was happy to see that we were actually on the approved list, if I may add. But the thing is I need to say is this information isn't filtered. It's not fact-checked. It's definitely anecdotal. But I have to say there wasn't much in the lines of bad advice that we got during our time discussing things. They're going to be very blunt. They may say things that you may not believe or approve of, and that's okay. Just avoid people that are saying these things. Like, in other words, if they say they're aliens from space, you'll be fine. Just say yes. Just go to the information that works for you. But I don't want to turn you away, because if you want to know if a shelter is functional, where any sick or infected may be, or where they're most prevalent, so you don't run into them. I'll just say I had every question answered relevantly in less than 20 minutes, and I knew exactly where I could go, where I couldn't go, and what to expect. And that's the thing, is I really didn't expect this system to work as functionally as it did. So it's my understanding that there are people who are running these emergency bands that just sit at stations and document the information that they have and relay it back and forth in a way that's very well updated and kept updated from minute to minute, when a lot of times we would get blanketed information. A lot of the information I'm getting now are going to be from these sources, and they're incredible in their ability to relay information. So if you don't have the time to come here and listen to this, I want to make sure that you have access to those areas that are, and they're highly advised that these communication centers are going to be there for you to get you up-to-date information, basically, instead of being a global area, to be something more directed at where you are. So that's going to be something that I'm going to make sure that you can have access to too. I'm sure if we go off the air officially, it's going to be where I'm headed, and I'm probably going to have more viewers there than anything. So, okay, what do we have next here? Okay, yes, something that I've been concerned for many is the advent of this fake information, or some were calling it fake news. And it's a new concept, I know. But what is happening, there are many groups out there that are either misinformed, smaller organizations, and just anything to get people to view them, especially on the social media sites that are becoming so prevalent. We have to realize that as an emergency broadcast system begins to come into effect, some of these major channels cannot function anymore. Those that can't make money are just going to close up shop, which is going to create a vacuum. And some of us are doing this for passion and giving you life-saving information, and even we don't know how long that's going to last, or at least in the way it's lasting in the presence that it is now. When emergency broadcast kicks in, they will simply tell us that we need to get off the air, and we could face government sanctions if we don't. So, and that's the other thing. At least until the power goes out, we're gonna try to be on until they kick us off, or until we don't have the ability to transmit anymore. So it's easy to say that since we aren't putting up the shelters, that these other sources can just send out that false information on shelters, etc., get you to tune in and act on that information that isn't correct, that is a danger to you or those that are listening to it, and could potentially put you in dangerous situations. And these sources are sending people to closed off shelters. They're talking with pre-recorded or repeating voices, some of that aren't even attached to real people. They sound like robots. So they are trying to just fill up this void, and although the frugal viewer won't fall for this, the newer viewers are showing up. Some of them are even paying for services, etc., and they're being fed old or outdated information. And some are just can transition over from local information that does not apply to the common viewer, and you name it, anything that they can get their hands on just to get people to say, hey, you know what, this is how things are happening, this is, this information is relevant. There are people that are going to be trying to find information to not just to find a place to stay, but to survive. That's exactly what this is all about. It's a survival sum game, if you will. The idea that we were talking about resources before, we still go to the point of that survival is based on that very thing, being still alive at the end of this, and managing resources to do that, things such as shelter, food, water. So having that information and having a way to do that while not being infected or running into things that will infect you are going to be the ultimate importance. And if somebody's giving you the wrong information, that is by definition bad. So obviously it's impossible to know who is what, but my suggestion is look for solid advice that's, driven, content-oriented media that is giving you information that is helping you to do the right thing. It's very clear to know what something, if something sounds outdated, if it sounds like information that you've heard before, that information, or if it sounds, I know this may seem weird, but if it sounds insane or out there in way left field, then there's a good chance that it probably is in left field. It's very easy to say that survival is not based on what your opponent looks like, so do not get wrapped up in that vision of your survival being simply, I'm just going to avoid these bad people and they're going to make everything better. That's not how this works. The idea is you have to have power, lights, water, food, coal, keep away from the cold. These resource management things that are going to be very effective for keeping you safe. And us being able to give you some information that's going to help you do that is paramount. And let's be honest, this could be the end of the world as we know it. And it certainly is becoming what many are calling a new normal. And your survival is going to be based on that information that you get and how you act on it. So even though we can pass on information, being able to act on information is going to be important. So making sure that the information you get is very clean, if you will. So can never think of the word, but anyway. So that's the thing is make sure that your information is exposed to light as much as possible. And like I said, that's why we were suggesting some of the amateur radio emergency systems, because they are on point. You're going to hear a lot of the stuff repeated here and things that are more directed at your local area in your amateur radio area. So we have two sources to really go to really pull this in. So we want that's going to make sure that you have the best information possible. So we want to stick to that, and that's what we plan to do. Okay, so some of the information that we were getting, I did want to go over it too, because a lot of people are getting bad information, and I want to make sure that we are kind of up to date on what this looks like to you, the survivor that is out there right now trying to pull things together. And for instance, many of these say that if you are bitten that you can get sick, and that is it, and it's the only way that you get bitten, you get turned into an infected. That is not the only way, and it is completely not true. There are other ways to get this illness. So the priority is going to be avoidance. If you can avoid the situations where you are around people who are ill or infected, or areas that have been prone to be populated by infected individuals, then it's best to avoid those areas as well. So all that stuff wrapped together all plays a role. And do we know how that happens? No, we're not sure. We're not 100% sure, but we just don't think just because you haven't been bitten that you can't get sick is an untrue statement. Also, some are saying that the infected are running, that they are mobile. So this is where things are going to get a little bit weird, but what we did is we contacted someone at the CDC, one of the reps that used to work for CDC, who gave me a good explanation of how to explain it to you. So I want to explain it like this. Infected have a limited amount of energy, and he described them like alligators that lie in wait, and then they burst out with an exertion of energy, and then that's it, they're done. They're now out of energy. They can only use a certain amount to basically pounce, and then they have to slow back down again. So they have a very limited pool of stamina, so they can exert that stamina, but basically the best they can do is hobble around. They're unable to speak. They groan or gurgle, and some of them can't really even stand up, if you will, which is the best. That obviously, if someone can't speak to you, that's a great way to find out if they are sick, is if they cannot properly communicate with you. So we've also heard that they are both dormant at night, and also saying that they can't do anything in daylight. And this is how he explained it to me as well, that somehow this illness damages the eyes of the infected, which means they probably can't see very well. It looks like a cataract or whiteness in the eyes, and some people have said it's possible they could basically be blind from a standpoint, but in short, their vision is not going to be up to par. So for instance, if you had a transition from darkness to light and vice versa, if you had a problem with your eyes, that could become very difficult. If anybody's ever had problems with at night where they see these big slash lines of light, you're going to have the same kind of problem. That's going to be something that they're going to see. They're not going to see it as a prominent source until they're basically right up on top of it, but there's this void that's going on of how they see. And again, this is all conjecture. This is what they believe based on people who've had these problems in the before, but there's a good deal of what we're seeing of reactions and how they react that we believe this is correct. So think of how you feel when you walk out of your house for a bright sunny day when it's dark inside, and all of a sudden your eyes are going to change. It's going to actually hurt. So you put your hand up and you block the light. Vice versa, you go into a dark area, you're completely blind. So we have that same kind of concept that's going on here. So it's not that they aren't moving in a certain time, but more of it doesn't feel good for them to change from one situation to the other. So there may be a chance that you could see someone who is like a statue inside of a house that simply you've walked by and they've refused to move, or they're not engaging you. And it may be a situation of they can't see you properly. There's potential that you just kind of stand in one place and basically disappear, or there's all sorts of options like that. And there are people who are saying that this stuff works, that changes in light, changes in patterns and things like that can be very confusing, or put a situation where an infected cannot react to what's going on. So a change in light, a change in dark. But rest assured, these things don't sleep, they don't rest, they may go dormant like we were saying, but and they maybe even use this time to recharge. But some don't do that. Some continue to move or mobile and react, and this is not based on age or look or anything like that. There's no way for you to kind of deduce it from sight. It's just going to be this is one that's moving and one isn't, and how they do that. And the idea of saying, you're in a sticky situation, this is how to counter it. And remember that, if you shine a light in something and you're moving the light around, there's a possibility that could draw attention to things. So there's little things that you just keep that thinking process in your head, and it's going to empower you better to understand how to deal with certain situations. But remember the hundreds and thousands of situations that we've always hear people in. So that's the point, empowering you to be able to understand how to combat this. So, and also one more thing before we go to break, I'm going to have to find something to help me treat this right now. But this has been a concern that I've wanted to say for a while. But there is now proof that these things are not losing function over a span of time as they should. I know that's going to sound confusing, but I'm going to clarify for you. Someone put it the way I best think that people get it is that these things don't rot, which I thought was an interesting use of the word. But basically people who have a certain amount of time, so we call it the big three, so 3 minutes of air, 3 days for water, 30 days of food, and that if you can't do those things, that's kind of your end, if you will. Well, these infected are not adhering to these rules. Scientists have found bodies that are still, and not trying to gross anybody out here, but they're still juicy, well after they should have started to decompose or have, not going to be able to remember the word for it, but basically it's part of that decomposition process. That is desiccation, I think is the word. There you go. But that process by which things decompose is not functioning in these infected. So it is possible that they can go extended times without food, water, shelter, perhaps even oxygen, that we don't know the answers to that. To whatever this is, it is going to keep them alive much longer than they should be. We have heard of them eating people, but scientists are saying that it's associated with spreading the illness more than it is actually functioning for sustenance. It may target the food-oriented part of their brain, but that it is not somehow giving them nourishment, that they are getting nourishment from some other source. So there's no clear rule on any of this either, but I want you to put it in context, because I think a lot of people who are hearing is saying, we're just going to wait this thing out. And I don't think that waiting it out is going to be an option. These things are not going away. They're going to be here for much longer than we first assumed, and how long we don't know. And that is important information for those out there right now who are looking at shelter resources and thinking, you know, the 3 rule. I know a lot of people were saying the 30-day food rule was what they were kind of sticking to, that things are going to start dropping at 30 days. That's not going to happen. It's definitely in the cards that that the 3-day water thing, the 30-day food thing, these no longer apply. We do not know what the rate is for death when it comes to infected. And that is probably the most sobering news that I'm going to hand over to you today. So before, that's where I'm going to leave it for you. You guys can discuss among yourselves. I'm going to head into a break. I'm going to be right back to continue this discussion. So everybody stay safe, stay alive, and stay informed. We're going to see you in a sec.